Welcome back to First Coast Living. The doctor is in, and today we wanted to talk about something that is in the news a lot of recent, and that is the Ebola breakout, obviously in the western part of Africa, but also with that first reported case being in Dallas. So we wanted to get your take on that before we get into some other topical news and things about flu. We're getting into that season where the flu is starting to go around. But Ebola, what's happening with Dallas and what we're seeing with this gentleman that's being hospitalized, and all of his relatives are being pretty much quarantined in that apartment in Dallas. What do people need to know about this to make sure that they're staying safe? Because a lot of people are really concerned.
Well, the first thing is not to overreact and not to get too crazy about it. The Ebola virus is in Africa. It's in the three countries, mainly Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. And we really haven't had an outbreak here yet. We do have someone here in Dallas, the only identified person with Ebola. There was a thought that there was someone in Hawaii that might have it, but that was proven wrong. And so this person came over. He was healthy when he came over. He didn't have a fever or anything. And because it has a 21-day latency period before you get the effects of it. To get Ebola, it's transmitted from one person to another via bodily fluids.
It's not airborne. That's the thing that has a lot of people concerned. If I cough in your direction and no bodily fluids go on you, and it's just my breath, you can't necessarily get
And you can't
Ebola.
even pick it up if it's infected on a countertop. It doesn't really last long outside the body. So there's thought that maybe in certain unique circumstances, sure, it'll last on a countertop if the temperature and humidity, everything's just very, very perfect, but really not. It's very, very difficult for it to be transmitted any other way than via exchange of bodily fluids. And that exchange of bodily fluids could be through blood, so through needles, or exchange of bodily fluids through sexual intercourse, or even through kissing and exchange of bodily fluids, and usually through mucous membranes or an open cut. That's how you would have to have the bodily fluids exchanged. That doesn't happen real often in real life with regular people. It does happen people who share needles and drugs and maybe in prostitution, but it doesn't happen a lot in regular life. So don't overreact.
Right. Well, it is scary when you turn on the TV and you see a lot of wall-to-wall coverage of people talking about what's going on with Ebola. And I know that the family, they're being quarantined, or the people who knew the gentleman who has Ebola, for 21 days because that's the incubation period. So once that time has gone by, theoretically, if they don't have it, then they're not going to get it, which I think everyone is waiting to see if it's going to spread.
Right. And by the way, during that incubation period of 21 days, those people are not infectious. So you can't get it from someone during the incubation period. You only can get it someone who has the symptoms of it.
And what are the symptoms? What are people seeing in Liberia and also with this gentleman in Dallas?
So the symptoms are very similar to the flu, which we're going to talk about.
Sure.
So the symptoms are fever, malaise, nausea, but it gets worse than that with Ebola. With Ebola, there's bleeding. You get internal bleeding through Ebola as well, and nausea and vomiting and those sort of things.
Well, let's talk about the flu, because we're getting into flu season and we're starting to see the...
But don't get confused if you have symptoms of the flu that it's Ebola.
Right.
You only, if you have those symptoms, you only think of Ebola if you've been in contact with someone who's traveled, if you've been in those countries, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia, or in contact with someone who's been there. But for now,
who's been there and who is exhibiting symptoms.
Who's been there and has been in contact with people who have had Ebola, and who's exhibiting symptoms.
Okay,
yes.
There you go. All right, let's talk about the flu vaccine, because I know it's this time of year. People are starting to, prepare because we're getting into the flu season. Is this the time we should be getting the flu vaccine?
Right, absolutely. Every year you should get the flu vaccine. And anyone 6 months of age or older should receive the flu vaccine. We used to recommend just people who are at high risk, people who are in health care or children in school. But not anymore. We recommend everyone 6 months and older receive the flu vaccine. We want to be sure that we eradicate the flu so that we protect others around you. So not just protecting yourself, but protecting others, because we don't want people to carry the flu and transmit to somebody else.
Is there one vaccine for everyone, or are there different types of
So there's
the
different
vaccine?
ways to get the flu vaccine. The basic flu shot, which I got a few weeks ago, and you can get anywhere, is good for most people. It's injected into the muscle, and it protects against the three major strains of the flu. For children, there's something called a nasal spray. It's a quadrivalent vaccine, quad 4. So it's good for 4 of the more common flu strains around this year. And it's best for children ages 2 to 8. They're around other children. They're interacting. The cleanliness isn't really top of their list, so they're really at higher risk. And so it's good for them to have the full quadrivalent strain vaccine. High-risk people, older people who don't have a good immune system, there's a high-dose vaccine for them, which has 4 times the amount of viral components to trigger a better immunologic response. So as we get older, our response to infection isn't as good as it is when we're younger. So you want to give older people a little bit more of a bump. And then finally, there's some other different options. There's some smaller needles that are used for intradermal. And also people who have egg allergies can't take the flu vaccine. So there's a new one that's made with this recombinant virus that's not made with eggs. But talk to your doctor about what's best for you.
We have time for one more question. I think this is an important one because I've heard some people who don't get the flu vaccine don't get it because they think it will give them the flu, that you're actually injecting a live virus in there and there's a possibility that you'll get the flu as a result. Is that true or false?
So researchers have identified which are the major subtypes of influenza virus this year. And the flu vaccine will protect you against those major subtypes, but it doesn't protect you from all of them. You can still get the flu. You can get another kind of flu. Also, a misconception is that the vaccine will give you the flu. No, it doesn't. It can't give you the flu, but you can have some symptoms, like you get a fever from it, some muscle aches, but you don't really get the flu.
All right. Dr. Ackerman, thank you so much for being here, as always, and for the information and for sponsoring this segment. And remember, if you have any questions regarding this topic or any other health questions that you may have, Dr. Ackerman's Facebook page is up and running, facebook.com/Ackerman Cancer Center.